Welcome to the LongBox Paradox special. I am here with my friend and guest, Karl Alstaetter. I'm trying to think if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's been a while since I've actually I've been working for a year trying to get him on since I started the channel. Finally got him on. He has a long career in comics, and you're a toy designer now?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So he first came on my radar in 1993. Wizard did a huge article on a book he had coming out called Q Unit, and Harris had all these great books coming out at one point. And from there, then you went on to Extreme Studios with Rob.
Well, actually, my career started a little bit before that. So I was part of the group that started Homage Studios, where I worked with Jim Lee, Will Spertasio, Scott Williams, Joe Chido. I worked with them through that X-Men run and beginning of Image. And then I did Q Unit with Robert Napton. He was the co-creator with me on that. And then I worked with Rob Liefeld on the Extreme books. I did Bloodstrike, which probably is, probably most well known for that.
I have a page from it on my wall.
What's that?
I have a page from it on my wall.
Oh, there you go. That proves it. And so I worked with Rob, and then Robert Napton and I, we teamed up again, and we co-created Deity and created Hyper.
Behind me.
Right, there you go. Haven't seen that in a while.
I still have it.
I appreciate you having that, dude. Yeah, so I started that company with Jamie Darahi. He was an investor and co-owner of it. And we did that for almost 8 years. And I did 4 years of publishing on my own with that, and then 4 years with Image. And then I did that and then transitioned into doing toy design. And so that's what I've been doing ever since then.
Do you get more enjoyment from creating the books or toy designing now, seeing something you're bringing to life basically from page to?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it's funny because when you're making a comic, you're doing it alone, and it's kind of, well, not alone. I mean, you have people that are working with you and stuff like that, but it's not. There's a long period of time between when you start it and when it actually people get to see it, right? And when they get to see it, it's instantly like, oh my God, it's a real thing. After it's printed, you take it out of the box and you're like, wow, all these hours, all this time and stuff like that. But with the toy industry, you have a lot of collaborators. You have a lot of people involved in the process. Like, for example, currently I work on the Batman toys. So you're working with WB, you're working with the licensing team there, you're working with the internal branding team, the engineers, your co-designers, people who are helping create it, sculptors, all kind of stuff like that. So you kind of have an idea of what it's going to be a long time before it actually comes out, but it's still kind of thrilling when you go into a Target and you see something that you designed. That never gets old for me. It's the same thing when I print a comic and I see it for the first time. I'm still thrilled to death. I mean, it's still the culmination of a lot of work. That never gets old. For sure.
And your kids get to play with a toy now.
Yeah. Like my son the other day, he was playing with this Batmobile I designed. And that's when you really see like, wow, this is what it's about. It's people, enjoying something that you helped create, You've
done a lot of self-publishing for the past, I'd say, 10 years now.
Past million years, yeah.
Well, roughly, because I remember Emerald City Blues feel like that's one of the first ones you were really heavy into.
Yeah, what's so weird about that project, so Emerald City Blues, it's kind of like a modern take on the Wizard of Oz, was sort of like a cyberpunk vibe to it. But that was created sort of on accident because, 24-hour comic book day, they have that every year.
Yeah.
So Jesse Toves, he has a Kickstarter right now called Encoding Bushido. You should check it out. He's a really good artist writer. And so he said to me, hey, why don't you come and do this 24-hour comic thing? And so I came in there with like no ideas. I didn't have any thoughts. And that's because I read that the premise was you come in and you just create a comic book from scratch. You don't have any layouts. You don't have any pre-thought ideas. And when I got there, I saw like all these people, and they had plots, they had pages, they had layouts, and I was like, wait a second, I think I approached this incorrectly, you know? So I did the first 17 pages of the comic in the first 24 hours. So I made it, and then I started putting it out online, and then I finished up the first issue, and I printed them up, and I took them to shows with me as more just like a afterthought, you know, just something I would do to kind of bring the work into a space that I was that I was familiar with. So I brought it, took it to shows, and I sold out of my first run. And then people were saying, oh, you know, are you going to finish this? Are you going to do it? So I invested more time into it. Well, 4 issues later, I was like, wait a second. I put a lot of time into an idea that was just kind of something that came out of that 24-hour experience. I mean, I spent more time developing it, but it's just an interesting way for a project to come about, you know?
Yeah, very much so. Especially just going in there, it's like kind of a blank slate and just being like, okay, this is formulating the idea and then putting it to page within 24 hours. That's very, very interesting way to do it.
Yeah, one of the things that was great about it is that when you're moving that quickly, and then even on the subsequent issues, I started realizing that maybe I was being a little too precious, you know, with my approach to comics. Like maybe I needed to loosen up and kind of see it more as an opportunity to try different things. So in terms of it being like a learning experience and something that I could experiment with, it's been great for that, because I've tried a lot of things that I probably would not have tried if I would have just sat there and gone at it the same way that I've always gone at making a comic, which is a super labor intensive thing, you know?
When you say getting precious, what do you mean? Because I've had kind of those feelings with writing where like I'm trying to write a script when I was trying to write comic scripts, and I'd end up with this monstrous just script that you couldn't, it would be all words. There'd be no room for art because I didn't want to cut anything.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing when you're making comics especially, is that they're so labor intensive that when you put some work into it, you're like, oh man, I put some time into this. I don't want to step back from it and maybe say, well, hey, is there a quicker way to do it or some way to edit myself? And you see that a lot in I think in independent comics is they don't have an editor, or they don't have someone that says, hey, a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, you know? And sometimes you see a lot of stuff that's really important to them in there, which is great, which is part of the process. But maybe sometimes it's okay to pull back and say, well, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to put this in, and be a little bit more thoughtful about not so much what's important to you in total, but maybe what's best for the story, you know?
I listened to a Joe Quesada interview with Kevin Smith when they were talking about the Daredevil run they did together for Marvel Knights. And Kevin Smith turned in this monstrous script, and Quesada's like, so where am I supposed to put the art? There's gonna be nothing but like text. And he's like, no, that is it. He's like, no, you're not doing this.
Have you ever seen an Alan Moore script?
I've heard about them because I forget because I know Greg Capullo on an interview he did talked about getting a Grant Morrison script, and it was telling him where to aim the camera and everything, and he got pissed off at it and threw it out.
Yeah. Well, like an Alan Moore script, I read one, I think it was one of the Supreme ones, or one of the ones he did for Image. And he was literally saying like, there's photos on a something behind the character, and to the left there's a photo of him doing this, and a photo. I mean, like, he really imagines what's happening in the panel in a way that, like, you know, I when I was coming up, everybody did what they call the Marvel style, which was, you know, basically like, well, here's page 6 and this is what happens, you figure out how it happens. Where like the full script is something that was more of a DC thing, but now I think is really like a more modern way that people are doing it, because I think writers have sort of transitioned from, I don't want to sound like it's a controversial thing, but I think they're more directing the action in a way that artists used to do more of. Maybe
it's going away from the Marvel method where the artist had more leeway, where getting hyper detailed scripts telling you where they want the angle coming from, and then they're doing the thumbnails.
Yeah, and it created like an extra challenge, I think, for writers because they'd get the art back, and sometimes it would have the beats that they wanted, and then other times it would have something completely different, and they would have to change their script or what they imagined the story to be. And I think that's not sort of fun, but I can imagine if you had written out a very detailed idea that you needed those beats in there, that you'd be kind of disappointed.
Got a question for you from the chat. I already know the answer to this.
Yes, I have actually.
I'm really digging the new album, like
Yeah,
a
me
lot.
too. I think what I like most about the album, well, and them in general, is they sort of do have like a retro vibe to them, you know?
Very much. They tell stories somewhat.
Yeah.
The DJ Shadows song "Nobody Speak" is great. All except when I hear it in car commercials, I was like, the next line of that is,
yeah,
like,
take a picture with your kids and
yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think what I really like about kind of the hip hop music that I grew up with is that they would, to your point, tell a story, and it
very,
was,
very much so.
yeah, and you could sit there and listen and sort of imagine it through that character's perspective, which I think really made it, unique. Where now it feels more like they're, I guess you would say, they're just reciting
Grandstanding.
imagery. Yeah, they're grandstanding, but also just like, hey, I'm gonna tell you about imagery, and the imagery is gonna be like flashing to you or whatever in your head. But that old school style, I think, brought
Public
you into a
Enemy,
world.
Slick Rick.
Yeah.
De La Soul didn't really tell stories, but it was weirdly enlightening.
Yeah, no, they did tell a little bit of stories. I was interesting thing is, so I was at a comic show in San Antonio, and me and Shannon Denton were sitting next to DMC from Run DMC, and he is just like, man, the coolest dude ever, nicest dude ever. So I started telling him, like, we started talking, and he told me like his whole history and how he was into comic books when he was in high school, and how he met Run, how he, the whole progression of their group, And then I was telling him about how when I was a kid, because I'm old, I'm super old, and I saw him on Live Aid, and I was telling him about, yeah. So I told him, I said, I remember seeing them stand out there and just they weren't doing anything. They were just standing there like in a b-boy pose in front of the whole crowd. And I remember seeing them being like, oh man, these dudes are just like facing off against the crowd almost, right? And so he told me that the reason why they weren't doing anything is because there was an issue with the record skipping. So their cue hadn't come up. So it totally like changed my perspective of it. But then when he told the story, he actually rapped a little bit of the beginning of what they did, right? So I had like a 2-minute thing of where he did it, and it was just gold for me, man.
Did you read the Hip Hop Family Tree?
I've seen it. I have not read it though.
It's fascinating. It is awesome. Although Russell Simmons does not come out good in it at all.
Yeah.
But really fascinating the way they did the history of like Grandmaster Flash and everybody, and then Public Enemy with Flavor Flav. Like they finally started getting to that point in it from the last arc of it. Fascinating to read, and I started having to go on like Wikipedia and go, wait, whoa, is this true? Like, how much of this is really true?
Yeah, it's interesting. What's his name? Ed Piskor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Piskor. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard his name pronounced, but I watched, I've seen what he's done with the X-Men stuff, what he's done with the hip hop, with that one. Guys, he's like a modern Crumb, you know what I mean?
Very interesting style to his art also,
yeah.
Where I got a question for your art. As you've aged looking at art, is it more important to you to see the art tell the story, or do you still like seeing the still illustrations?
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I think when I was growing up and reading comics, it was very much like everything was dedicated to telling the story, but telling it in a stylish fashion. And then as I got into the industry and then the image era happened, I think there was a change and more of an emphasis on creating beautiful imagery with sort of a graphic collage around it, which I think is kind of what they call like anchoring a page, where you have a kind of a larger image, and then the storytelling is sort of told around it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, Sounds like one of my kids' video games is going off. Anyways, the modern comics though, they're really influenced a lot by storyboard artwork, you know, and you can see that so much of the artwork has that sort of frame, you know, like individual frames, and that I think is sort of taken a little bit away from the dynamics of it. I think it tells the story well, but it sort of flattens the imagery in terms of emphasis. So you're seeing a lot of modern comic art is beautifully rendered, beautifully drawn, great draftsmanship, great rendering, all that stuff. But there's some qualities to it that I think is they're so concerned with kind of following that beat structure of the individual same size panels. And I think that really started a lot with Ultimates. You know, that's when you start to see
Yes.
that happen. And the thing though that he was great about, Hitch was great about, is that he could capture the realism. He could do that frame by frame cinematic view, but then he could also do some great huge scenes that sort of depicted really superhero stuff, you know, where I think a lot of people nowadays are like very, you know, I guess you'd say formulaic a little bit. But then when you look in a lot of manga stuff, you're now seeing them be way more exaggerated than they've ever been.
Very
So
much so. Attack on Titan in particular is one that like is so exaggerated and blown out.
yeah, or look at like My Hero Academia. It's
Yes.
basically like it's the superhero tropes told through like a manga sort of lens. And it's interesting how much of the kind of image era comic book they capture, even in the rendering of the main character. I think what his name is right now. The guy who gives the powers to the kid.
Yeah.
God, what's his name?
I can't remember. I just remember he creeps me out when he's in his normal form.
Yeah, when he's all like when he's all like deflated, so to speak.
Yeah, he's the scariest individual in the whole series.
Yeah. But you can see even there, they're beginning to capture more of that. You know, they're getting more exaggerated while American comics are getting more standardized in a way.
Because there was one of the book clubs we did the first volume of Low, and there's a specific section of Greg Tocchini's art which can be distracting with the beauty of it sometimes, but it was a very silent scene where it was moving and you're following it and it's telling the story and moving it along without a word balloon. And I was like, that's beautiful. That's great. I can appreciate this. Steve Dillon also on Preacher and Punisher had a way of exaggeration but moving the story along in a way that you could appreciate, where some people hate his art, and I've learned over the years to really start appreciating it.
Yeah. Well, like something like with Lowe, his artwork is interesting because he's obviously like a next level superior draftsman, you know, but in the way that they do color and the way that he does structures the panels, it occasionally gets abstract. Do you know what I mean? But for his style of work, it's always grounded in that sort of great draftsmanship, so it pulls you back in. But I know there's been times where I've looked at stuff and I'm like in his comic, and I'll be like, the same feeling I get when I see Ashley Wood. It's like I'm not sure what's going on here, but it just looks great.
You know? I remember the first time I ever found Steranko's Shield, and I remember like just going, all right, like this is beautiful. It's abstract. It's mod. Like,
yeah,
it was so many different styles, and then there was the one where you had to move the book to actually read the panels. Like, fascinating the way he did it. And then, you know, there's a story about him trying to throw an editor out the window because they weren't going to pay him for a page because they said there was no writing on it because there was no word balloons. Really interesting dude. Like, especially the whole, he used to be an escape artist.
Yeah, he's like a character that transcends even his art, you know. He's like one of those dudes in comics, almost like Grant Morrison too, where they like exist beyond just what they create, you know.
One of the artists I don't think gets enough credit that he deserves, and maybe in Europe he does, Travis Charest or Charest. Like his stuff just always beautiful, always on point. He's like, if he puts something out, even if it's cover, I pick it up.
Yeah, he's interesting too because um, there's always like a guy who, um, not a guy or any artist. I don't want to say guy. It could be any person that comes out and you'll see it. It's like people. I don't want to name specific artists, but there's a lot of artists that are influenced by Travis Stress. They, you can see like one of them took his rendering style from this era. One guy took his sort of the nature of his line weights and proportions, and one guy took faces and how he renders. You can see how his artwork had so many interesting elements that people came in and took aspects of it and be able to develop whole styles just based on certain aspects.
You mean like Roger Cruz stealing from Madeira?
Yeah. I'd say Joe Matt is another one who influenced a lot of people. You'll see them like there's sort of artists that just they bring that creativity out in other people, or their solutions are so interesting that people are like, I want to use that in the way that I describe stuff.
The artist that did Kaboom,
Jeff
Matsuda, like he has such a distinct art style. Like the minute like he did that Batman series, the minute you saw the art, I was like, that's Matsuda.
Yeah, a lot of artists, they have that sort of signature look, that looks like Mignola or something. Like when you see a Mignola piece, it's like no doubt his piece, or even Frank Miller for that example.
Although his art's so exaggerated now as he's gotten older.
Yeah, I know you and I have talked a lot about Frank Miller in terms, back and forth. I mean, it's so weird for me because he's such a hero to me, so in terms of his art. So even when you're seeing him nowadays, like to me, where you're seeing this sort of more exaggerated, some people would even say like uglier version of his artwork, it still intrigues me. I look at it and just seeing the kind of, you can tell I wouldn't say he doesn't care, but I don't think he feels a need to please people.
It's also, I think, the limitations of his health, where maybe he can't spend that amount of time at the table, where he has to be looser. I do remember when Dark Knight Returns or DK2 came out, going, what in the world happened?
Yeah.
That was shocking to me. Like, and then, I started thinking, okay, well, the World Trade Center stuff happened as he was midway through, I think, the second issue. So we had to completely redo it. There's a lot of things that went on with that, and he might not have been the best state to do it. Like, he's kind of mailing it in.
Yeah, I know. What was the one he did that was super controversial? The one he did for Legendary.
Oh, the Holy Terror.
Yeah. It's weird when it came out. I was like, when I first saw it, I was like, wow, it's so, it felt like it was messy. But after looking at it, there's some really great stuff in terms of if you take away the controversy around the material and you just look at what he did artistically, he's still doing some amazing stuff in that. And even in his later Sin City stuff, he's still doing some pretty brave and bold stuff.
I was actually surprised how much I liked the Golden Child one shot.
Oh yeah,
that he wrote, because that was very well done. And usually, I'm not a big fan of Raphael Grampa's art.
Well, I'm a huge fan.
He seemed very restrained in it, and it looked cleaner than normal.
Yeah, I love that guy's stuff.
He kind of is, like Romita Jr. for me, where some of Romita's stuff looks really great to me, and other stuff I'm like, yeah, I wish it. Yeah, I'm always like, why can't it look like the X-Men he did way back when? Because that was pretty clean, and it might have just been his style evolved over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's weird. For me, I think coming at it from the perspective of, when you make a comic and I see these artists sort of evolve, I'm always intrigued by the evolution more than I am like what they started out as. I like seeing once they get their legs under them, because you sort of see an expressive side of them. You can tell that like, okay, they're a little more brave than they were maybe when they were first starting out. They're trying different stuff, like in the case of Romita Jr., you can see like he started happening, I think, around his Daredevil run. where it started having more bulky looking, and then he was
Yes.
doing, yeah, and it really evolved from there. And to me, that was when you really started to see his real style. So that was exciting to me.
There's an artist that it's controversial. People either hate her art or love it. Have you seen the covers by Peach Momoko?
Yeah, I've heard of her artwork. Yeah.
The books on the secondary market exploded, but people are like angry at it because they're like, it's ugly, it's childish, because it has a bit of a manga style to it. Not like a Yoshitaka Amano type of style, but you can definitely see the influences into it, and it's a little bit loose, not tight lines, but there's something to it. It's almost childish in some areas.
Well, it's funny because it might be controversial now, but I bet you in 2 years, 3 years, whatever, when you see a bunch of people who were influenced by that, where it will now seem like classic. That happens a lot in comics, I think.
I mean, there's another artist I love, Tula Lotte. Do you follow her art? Do you remember Supreme the Blue Rose?
No.
That came out by Tula Lotte did the art. You can find her on Twitter. Her art, she's fantastic. Like, just the lines are clean. No exaggeration, a little bit of realism, but surrealist backgrounds to it. I just enjoy her art amazingly. Like, Becky Cloonan's another one that over the years I've grown to appreciate greatly.
Oh yeah, she's really good. I mean, and if you see how her work developed from all the way from demo until now, it's pretty staggering.
Yeah, definitely. Josh, oh my God, he used to do NYX. He's Middleton.
Yeah.
His art has progressed amazingly since when he first started on NYX way back when. And then seeing his covers he's putting out now, where he's one of the hottest cover artists.
Oh yeah, he's good.
Which goes back to we have so many great cover artists and not enough great interior artists, in my opinion, or people not willing to do interiors because of the grind.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that's really changed a lot in the modern era of comics, where it used to be you'd see the cover and then you'd open it up and the actual guy would be doing the interiors, you know? And I think now they're like, well, we want to sell to the collector market potentially, you know, in terms of covers, collectible covers, which is, you know, it's a big moneymaker still, you know?
Yeah, because in my head, if you got like McFarlane to agree to do 10 issues of something, or even J. Scott Campbell to do interior, I feel like your sales would be insane.
Yeah, I've often thought that, what if you had there's so many artists that did monthly books or did regular runs that don't do regular runs at all anymore. And to your point, I think it's the grind that's an element of it. I also think that when you see other industries, like, I think there's probably a generation of comic book artists that just went into video game designs. You know what I mean? Like, they skipped over comics and just went to a more profitable place, you know?
But I think it was you that you said that you saw the Batman, some pages by Silvestri.
Yeah.
That's what, 5-7 years now that have never materialized on actual being made.
Yeah, he showed me a couple pages at Amazing Arizona a few years back actually, and they're just unbelievable. You know, I mean, I would, you know, he's doing like a level of art that, I mean, he's already a fantastic artist. So to see him do like a leveled up thing, that was amazing to see, and I think a lot of people will dig it once it comes out. But I still would love to see him doing a monthly book, or Joe Madureira doing a monthly book, but I don't even think that they could afford them now.
No, Joe already pissed people off with his Kickstarter for the game, where he said that he was going to finish Battle Chasers and said, "Oh, I can't do the interiors now. I'm going to get someone who can ape my work."
Well, I don't think he has to reach too far, because there's a lot of people that do it.
Just find Roger Cruz. Like,
I don't know if you've seen Roger Cruz stuff recently, but
it's changed a bit.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think he needed to get out of the shadow, because like people were goofing on him about that.
Yeah, for quite a few years.
And I saw like Umberto Ramos, I think unfairly gets shit for his style, but I feel like him and Bachalo both have a distinct style that if they change their style, I don't know if it would work.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many guys that are so stylized that sometimes I feel like people see what they do, and unless they evolve, they kind of lock them into that era. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that goes back to the idea of artists evolving, which I think is actually super healthy for them. You know, because it allows them. I mean, no matter what you do, there's always going to be somebody who looks back at your old work and says, "I wish you were still doing that." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think as an artist, you want to stay. You know, you see it like with musicians, where like they do something that a new album that they're really into, and they want to tour on that and play those songs, and everybody's like, well, why don't you play the hits from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or whatever? You know, I think comic book artists are somewhat similar in that they want to be evolving, showing off their newest influences, showing what they're interested in, and then people are like, oh, I wish you drew how you drew when I first discovered you, you know?
Well, I know like Sean Gordon Murphy's another guy. Like he draws the best like trashed neighborhoods ever. Like his draftsmanship on that is just amazing.
Yeah, no, his whole thing of drawing backgrounds, man. Like I look at some of his pages and I'm like, wow, how does that dude, you know, get anything done? I mean, he does so much work, but then there's so much to it, you know. I read his both the White Knight series that he did recently. I know he's doing like a independent
Kickstarter,
thing, right?
yeah. I gotta say, his writing got better by the second one, but he still has a little ways to go as a writer. But that comes with time.
I think his artwork sort of compensates for it. You know, he's such a good storyteller that I mean, I don't mind his writing at all, but I do think that when you have artwork that's that nice, I mean, you could write anything and it would still seem pretty cohesive, you know?
Speaking of art evolution, Capullo, I felt, was an artist who got out of the shadow of Spawn and made his own style eventually. Especially on the Batman run, like his art changed quite a bit, but I don't know if it was because he had Danny Mickey doing the and Glapion both changing the inking for him, where the style kind of changed a bit.
Well, I mean, do you remember his style when he worked on Quasar?
Yes, where he basically looked McFarlane-esque.
No, I thought his Quasar stuff in some ways looked a bit like Ramita Jr. and a little bit of Quesada of that era, on all the way back on Quasar.
I used to read Quasar.
Yeah, super simplistic. But then when he started working with McFarlane and McFarlane started inking him, that's when you saw, like, I think, more the super detailed, crackly version of him, you know? And then on Batman, it could just be the source material. You know what I mean? Like,
it could be.
I mean, have you seen the book that has like all of his pencils from that run?
No, I haven't. I never picked that one up.
Yeah, it's pretty telling in terms of his approach, because you can see it's a lot more. How would you say? It's more about spotting the blacks than it is about putting in textural detail, you know. But I also think, to your point, the inking makes a huge difference on him.
Yeah, that's the switch between Glapion and Mickey. It was very telling what a change it did to his art, because Mickey had a heavier hand, it looked like, with the darks and the shadows on it.
Well, yeah, and Danny, I think, has, from working on Spawn and all the different stuff he's done, he has a specific look. You know, he's, to me, similar to like a Terry Austin or something, where when you see him ink something, you can really tell he brings a lot to it in terms of his own style, where I feel like Glapion sort of follows the sort of pencils a little bit closer and does a little more editing of it, you know, simplifying of it. I think that dude's really talented. I mean, everything that I've seen him ink just looked great.
There was a guy from Extreme who's still pretty heavy. I can't remember his name. He's still working in like pretty heavily right now. Oh God, I saw him at the cons. He was right next to Todd Knock when I was having Knock do a sketch for me, and I can't remember his name. It started with an R.
Norm Rapman?
Yes. Very distinct style.
Yeah.
Also. God, I don't know why I blanked on him.
Norm inked me a lot during the Extreme era. Norm's a great guy, great artist. He can actually, I think the reason why he's, a lot of these guys that I think are great inkers are also really good artists too.
Yeah, he was doing commissions next to Knock when I was there.
Yeah.
And his stuff was like clean, real clean.
Yeah. Now he did a really nice job over the last few years over Brett Booth. Like I think they did, was it Teen Titans? There was one other book I think they did too together. But yeah, he really worked well with his style.
Yeah, they did that Wally West book recently too. The I can't even remember the name of it. It's just recently where he ended up with becoming Dr. Manhattan, basically.
Oh, really?
Oh God, yeah, it's terrible, but the art was nice. Brett Booth is one of those guys who his stuff's just constantly clean, consistent.
Yeah.
Like, looking at it, it's Brett Booth. He's been like that since the Wildstorm days and has not changed.
Yeah, I saw him. I've seen some stuff. Do you know who Adelso Corona is?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's been doing a lot of pieces over him, like what do you call it? Pieces, commission pieces, and man, their kind of look that they have together is just great, And I actually think Brett Booth has his style has really evolved even too. It's way more cohesive. It's really cool stuff.
So we've been kind of talking about the industry, the pandemic, with how much it's changed everything. Where are we going with it now? Like DC now having their own distribution. Now they're giant corporate entities owned by Disney and AT&T. We have no children's books really to hook younger readers in. Like, where are we at with this?
Wow, that's a big thought, just from over the years, what I've seen, where I've seen it, the kind of evolution I've seen with it is, I think there was a certain point where the big two sort of surrendered the idea that they were going to make the comic books to specifically entertain the people who bought them. I think they started thinking about, well, how do we turn these into movies? How do we turn these into other things? Which is great. I mean, if you own a library like that, I totally get it. But I think in terms of creating content that just stands alone, it's that strategy doesn't always work hand in hand. I think a good example is how something like Watchmen has just sold continually and continually and continually, is because it's a self-contained story. If you just bought the one Watchmen graphic novel, you could read it from front to back and it would just be one contained story, right? Plus it's something, and I think so much of these comics where they I feel like they also gave up on continuity as being a big thing, which I think was a driver for the week to week consumer, where they would come in and they would want to know what happened, and they liked the idea that they were always participating in a much larger narrative. So if you bought Spider-Man, you knew that you were in the same universe as the Avengers, or you knew you were in the same universe as Fantastic Four. And so if you decided to pick up Fantastic Four, you still felt like you were in the same timeline, in the same part of the bigger story. So when crossovers started happening more, these big event things, it lent itself. The continuity was sort of the building point for these larger crossovers, because even though they took place slightly out of continuity, you still felt they were in the same space of the narrative. And once they sort of gave up ground to that, where they started saying, well, it doesn't necessarily have to fit, or we can tell these sort of Elseworld stories and take the characters out of it so that we can make a trade or make a graphic novel, I think it kind of, in terms of making a healthy week to week consumer, it made that more difficult,
early on my Marvel buying when I first started in like 1985, and I was, like I dropped into X-Men. I picked my starting point and just went into X-Men because there was a
Yeah,
cover I liked with Wolverine. They always had those
that's
little
usually how it
footnotes.
happens. Yeah.
They had those little footnotes that said, "Hey, this happened in issue whatever," and that fed my back issue buying, where I was like, "Well, I got to know
Yeah.
what happens here." So that always would be like, "Okay, well, this character appeared here. Let me go find that issue. Let me go get that." And once they started doing away with that, like for a new reader who didn't know what was going on, like I felt that kind of was painful. And then I also had the Handbook of the Marvel Universe when I first started reading, and Marvel
Yeah.
Saga. So I had all those things in the who's who of the DC universe. So my entry point, I think I picked a good year to get into it.
Yeah.
And now it's just you don't want to like I started right after Crisis. So Crisis, everything reset, so everything was just there and everything was in continuity. And like DC, right after New 52 started, you went into this new rebirth, and they picked and choose what they wanted to keep.
Yeah.
Very confusing.
Well, anytime they create a jumping on point for new consumers, that's always like a really positive. Like when they did the New 52, I thought that was smart because it brought in a bunch of new people into it. Or maybe there were people who had stopped reading and decided to come back to see what was going on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the thing though is after these events where you generate that kind of readership, I think you have to sort of follow it up with if you look, for example, like in the New 52 rebooted, and then they brought in the what's his name, Scott Snyder, right?
Yeah.
So when they had that storyline, uh, and with a consistent art team, consistent writing team, they were able to follow up on that success. I mean, obviously, Batman is a huge character, but having stories lined up that engage the reader week to week. I mean, I know this probably sounds like, sure, yeah, that's obvious. You want to have good
They
stories
kept
to
the
get,
they kept the team on for I
yeah,
think Capullo only missed like 5 issues altogether on a very large run.
yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said for not only continuity in the story, but continuity in the creative team. And I've heard, you know, there's different talk that it's difficult to maintain a team on a book where it's hard to get them, on schedule, keep them on schedule and stuff like that. But that's sort of the nature of the business. And if you were able to get a team on there that is really successful, then maybe that's an opportunity to pay them better, to keep them interested, to keep them wanting to continue to create for you, you know? Where it
I've
seems like now they have a team who does it for 2 issues, and then they have 3 issue fill in, and then the team comes back for another issue too, and then the series gets canceled.
I know I had a theory about Marvel, how like at a certain point I was like, all their books, the art's starting to look the same. Like it's a house style now. Of maybe they needed to have like a house style of people who can make their deadlines, just get the books out.
I think that could maybe be it to a certain extent. I also think that there's been way more of an emphasis on maintaining the look of the characters versus having, like, I don't think you could necessarily have a McFarlane thing happen with Spider-Man. You remember when McFarlane first came onto Spider-Man? He was
Yes.
so different than how you'd ever seen Spider-Man.
And the editors fought him.
Yeah, but once it captured the audience, it just it spun out. But I don't think you would necessarily have that happen today because it would be so inconsistent with what they've established that they wouldn't allow it to really develop that momentum.
I mean, I remember McFarlane on Hulk, like, because that's my entry point was when he was doing it. And I was like, wait, the Hulk's gray and he's smart. What the hell's going on? And
yeah,
just the style of it, and it grew on me. And then Peter David's writing, and it was an interesting like couple of years to get into comics because it was right as New Mutants was going. I guess it was 3 or 4 years later. Rob went on to that.
yeah.
Jim Lee and Silvestri were on the X books, which Silvestri back then, which everybody always says like Silvestri out of all the Image guys was probably one of the best draftsmen out of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with him on the first issue of Cyberforce, and watching him draw, I don't know if this is true, but when I would watch him, it just seemed so easy for him. You know, he's one of those guys who just you could just tell it flowed out of him. You know, most of the other artists I've known, even the really well-known ones and the ones that, you know, have done art that's really memorable, they all had like a system to get there. You know, they had a sort of a routine or some sort of process that they used to get these results, where I felt like when I saw Mark draw, it was just like he had a blank page, and then 2 hours later he had this fantastic piece. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he would do like some roughs, like, but it just, I feel like he knew what was going to be there already, you know, in terms of draftsmanship too, which is really hard to be able to just see it and make it without doing a lot of build up towards it, you know.
So the Marvel styles, like I fight with this because I think on your big books you should have the best talent you have on them. Like X-Men, Spider-Man, you should never not have your top talent on them. Those are your flagship books.
Yeah, I think though it's like, yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that, but I think it's also determining now, like, say for example, if an Avengers movie's coming out, they may want to push Avengers. You know what I mean? Spider-Man movies coming out, they want to push Spider-Man. When I'd heard things that when X-Men was not with Marvel Studios, that they weren't pushing it within the comics.
Them and Fantastic Four both went away for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So if I think Marvel in some ways kind of, you know, if when X-Men's doing well, they seem to be doing really well, you know? So having that top talent, I mean, the guys who did the art on the latest, what was the
House of X?
Yeah.
Powers of X, yes. Pepe Larraz, I thought, I didn't know much of his work, but I was actually very pleased with it. And then Hickman, once you get over like his info dumps, or as my co-host Jennifer, who is in the chat, she calls it the Hickman dump, where it just throws all this information at you at one shot, and then you have to digest it and deal with it.
Yeah, he definitely has. I read through them, and I don't think it's like there's no negativity to it in terms of like, it's just a different way of telling the story. And I think X-Men fans, though, seem to want to have something that's a little more spontaneous. Like, you don't know what's going to happen with it. With this, it feels like when you read all that information, you know that there's a hand behind it. You know what I mean?
There she is.
There she is. That structured the whole story. So you know that it sort of takes you a little bit out of it, maybe, in terms of a reader.
So his newest book, Decorum, we had this weird feeling that it took the third issue for it to feel like it should have been the first issue. Between the inconsistent art and then like it just info dumped you into like submission.
Yeah, I think that's a book. I think you and I were talking about that I think I'm going to wait for the trade on that one. It's one of those books that I think
it's 8 issues.
Yeah, you got to read it in one run, you know?
Yeah, there's another book that Image they pounded you with just like propaganda for it coming out. Like Kat Salazar, who does their PR, they just hammered Mercy by Mirka Andolfo, like, buy this book, this is next saga, hit. And then we read it and we're like, this isn't so good. And unfortunately, we've been hate reading it because we're like, something's got to happen. The art's beautiful, but the writing, there's something just missing with it.
So is hate reading the same like when you start watching a TV show and you're binging it and then you're like, I'm not as interested, but I feel compelled to finish it?
Yes, totally. Like it's committed. It's a commitment.
Or as I like to refer to it as Westworld Season 3.
I've never watched Westworld. I've watched none of it. I haven't.
Well, Westworld Season 3 is that season for me. where I just said, I watched both the other seasons. I'm not really happy with this season, but I'm going to continue to watch it anyways.
Game of Thrones season 8.
I actually finally watched that, and I didn't have as big a problem with it as I think other people did. It
was
did
the
feel like it was on fast forward.
It was the coin flip scene for her where she's like, no, fuck it, burn it.
Yeah, and then she was so relentless about it.
Yes.
But I guess she's like, hey, I mean, if you see her backstory, her history, I mean, she's known for taking people out, known for doing some pretty heavy-handed stuff.
There was a meme that came out right after it where it's Jon Snow, like, I got 99 problems with a bit. I got 100 problems. I got 100 problems.
That's funny.
So before the show started, we were kind of talking about the industry, how like the big two now are your stepping stone to get your name out, where before it was independents. You use them to get your name out to go to the big two. I don't know how long that's going to last. If some point like Disney and DC are going to start shelling out more money to get top talent back, or overpay maybe to get people to come onto some books. There's some exclusive contracts running out now, like Bendis is one of them for DC. I think Snyder and Capullo's are up. Tom King's will be up soon, which I won't touch any further on that. Great writer outside of Batman.
Man, there's so many different ways that I see the industry sort of fracturing right now. You're seeing so many people do individual Kickstarter stuff. You're seeing so many people doing a Kickstarter, then releasing it with a publisher to get into different areas. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to be similar to when you see like a movie studio hire a writing team and a director and a specific actor, and this would be like, the equivalent of who's the artist and who's the writer of this book, or is it a writer artist? You know what I mean? Where they're going to say, hey, we want to put out 3 Batman products this year or 3 X-Men products this year, and we want to drive these products in a certain way. It's going to be more like how you would see a movie studio run, where I think they're going to want to interact with talent in that way. But I think we're beginning to see this separate parallel industry, and this is something I talked about on a few different panels, where you're seeing people sell directly to the consumer, which I think is where a lot of creative big name people are going to start going. I mean, look at this Keanu Reeves Kickstarter. That proves to me that that's gone mainstream. Normally you could have just put that out through Diamond or through regular distribution channels, and you probably would have sold quite a lot. But leveraging this direct to consumer pathway, that's where you're really seeing, I think you're going to see the biggest build. So you'll see some people say, well, hey, I'm doing a Kickstarter. I make, a good, I fund the product. I fund the comic. I fund the concept, however you want to see it. And then meanwhile, I might get hired by the big two to create one of their key kind of showcases, that's where I think they're going to evolve, is they're going to say like, well, we want to have X amount of kind of product that we know we can count on this year to be successful. And as they move away, I think, from monthly comics, we're going to start to see more of that black label type of thing. I think, even though that seems to be sort of scuttled a little bit, I think we're still going to see that kind of process where you get a team, you get a concept, and then you create that.
DC seems to be sabotaging their own black label, though. Like, it's weird. Like, they started, editing, having reactions because of the Bat Wang and Batman Damned, making Bermejo redraw issue 2, which for him was labor intensive. And then there's always these rumors of black labels going under. They're getting rid of it. It's interesting because they have one of the best books out right now on Black Label, The Last God by Federici and Philip Kennedy Johnson. It's one of the few books. The art on the cover is the same as inside. Federici's art is fantastic. And if you like Lord of the Rings, it's basically if the Fellowship went and said they killed Sauron and came back, and they actually didn't.
Oh, that's interesting. Sounds like
It's
a cool premise.
a great book. It's just fantastic. And then Boom Studios out of nowhere started hiring top talent. Like they got Tinian, Kieran Gillen. Now they weirdly have Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
I could see the trend going on with them getting more mid-tier creators where they're not going to spend a ton of money on, but they're going to be doable for them as they kind of build their cachet.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these, in some ways, they're like independent movie studios where they're developing stuff that can be, put out on a larger scale. I mean, definitely with the Boom stuff, it feels to me like they're doing development for something
Netflix.
outside of comics. Yeah,
they've got
exactly.
Netflix deal.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what they're probably doing is how can we get out these ideas, get the content out there, generate a buzz for it, and then maybe try to sell it into a different platform,
So, what is a book or artist maybe you think people might be sleeping on then should get on?
Oh, well, I don't think anybody's sleeping on it, but the book that I really like is Sea of Stars. You know this one?
I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah, I just it did not bring me in.
I think
Like I
I'm a little
tried.
bit more forgiving than you when it comes to books.
There was a book by the guy who did Thumbs though called Bliss that came out that I really enjoyed. It's dark as fuck though. Sea of Stars just I don't know why it like had that moment of like the first book where if it doesn't bring you in, it's not going to.
Yeah, to me it's a book. I mean, it's kind of constantly evolving in terms of the story, but it's just it sort of captures the mood, Even the graphic design on it, the way the logos are on the cover, it creates a mood. I'm always even back to when I worked on the deity stuff, I was really trying to capture the rave culture of that period of time, and so logos and the graphic design that surrounded it was really important to me. So when I see that kind of done in other stuff, I'm always excited by that because it feels to me like they didn't skimp on creating an experience. They went all in on it.
There was a book that just came out from Boom. We only find them when they're dead.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
It's one of those books where I finished it. I was like, I wanted to know a lot more, and it didn't give me a whole lot. But at the same time, a lot happened in the book that was hard to follow. Like they kind of just like dropped story segments without leading into it. I was like, wait, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Like, had a little bit of Kirby-esque feel to like the gods they show because they're just dead floating space gods that they're harvesting for like organs and skin.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was something that was kind of, didn't they talk like kind of conceptually about that in Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one?
Yes, the Nowhere. It was the head of the Celestial.
Eternal. Yeah, or Celestial.
Yeah.
So that kind of felt like when I read the premise that maybe it was somewhat similar to that, which is cool. I thought it was a cool idea. I've been wanting to check that book out. I saw a variant cover for it that looked really great. So
I think it was the Christian Ward one.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, but I have to get out to the comic store at some point.
Manga Kirby. Is there a movie that you've watched maybe that you think people, because I know we always talk about pop culture, movies, music.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird. It's like now with the streaming stuff, it's such a different experience. Like I was super excited to see Tenet. I was super excited to see Wonder Woman when it was going to come out. Those were stuff that I was really looking forward to. But now it's like you're just like, what's available to me?
Yeah, like I was kind of disappointed hearing that Candyman wasn't going to come out because I thought that was one that would come out in theaters and VOD, but now they're pushing that. Dune got pushed to 2021 now because Wonder Woman now moved back to December. Tenet, I still want to see. Like, I really want to see it. I mean, before I wanted to see it because of the Dune teaser, but that leaked online. So,
I know you've been doing the Dune read through, right?
Yeah.
And so, Mike, can I ask you a question?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
I'm here for it.
All right, let's do it. So when you watched the Dune trailer, you watched it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I read the book quite a few years ago, but I felt like it looked like a rezzed up version of the Lynch film. Like it looked like they took a lot of the same kind of imagery, but just up-resed it for current type of effects and aesthetic.
We were actually talking about it, that we felt there was a lot of hat tips to the David Lynch version and also the unmade Jodorowsky version.
Mm-hmm.
Where them using Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd was supposed to do the soundtrack for the Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah.
And they used Pink Floyd, a Hans Zimmer version of Eclipse Brain Damage in it.
Yeah.
The Reverend Mother in the trailer was wearing something close to what was in the Lynch movie, but a little bit more looking like a doily over the head.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of homages to it. The still suits look better. Again, Denis Villeneuve, like, he is Slavish to a point, like we saw with Blade Runner, where he's going to add his own elements, but he's also going to kind of bring up parts from the other versions. Because I know he said he respected the David Lynch version, but it wasn't his Dune.
Yeah. I mean, if you look back at like the Lynch version, despite all of its, I guess you would say inconsistencies, it's still, for the time it came out, it's
cutting edge.
Visually, yeah, it really is.
When the sandworm comes out, I was just like, okay, every bit of money they dumped into it, I'm here for it.
Yeah, and just like the aesthetic of it is so influential. It has like a very steampunkish vibe, especially at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It has a whole kind of really like a dark version of Flash Gordon in a weird way.
Oh wow, I never thought of it that way. Wow.
Yeah, where it has a bit of the cartooniness of it. I guess you'd say.
The one thing, like, with this cast they have, where it's like an all-star cast, like, I can't imagine it being bad.
Well, like, to me, the main story of Dune is, it's cool, but I think what infatuates people about Dune are all the larger concepts.
The world building. On a read through, there's something that we picked up that they keep hammering, where Paul's saying, "I feel infected with terrible purpose." And I never picked it up in the old readings of it, but like now I'm like noticing like them hammering it home.
Yeah, I feel like almost they should have just taken the world of Dune and then done stories within the world of Dune, within the universe that's created there, which you could do totally like a Game of Thrones type of thing.
Yeah.
And I talked about this, where it has all the sort of palace intrigue and the different families and the different, you could definitely do a Game of Thrones type of thing with it. And that's what I think is the fascinating thing about Dune. The story itself, to me, Dune suffers a little bit from the same thing that John Carter of Mars suffers from, in that so many people have used it as like the touchstone to create other stuff, that when you go back and experience that original story, it feels like, oh, well, I've heard this story, or I've seen this story, or I've, so that's what I feel kind of in some ways works against it,
I just know from watching Jodorowsky's Dune, I want that Bible of all of Mobius's art that he has. That's one of one or one of two that exist. Like, as he's flipping through it, I was like, oh my god, like all that Mobius art, like it.
Yeah,
I just want to at least flip through it.
When I watched Jodorowsky's Dune, the thing that was so apparent to me was that the guy has ultimate confidence in his vision, which, as a creative person, when you look at that, at least for me, I was like, wow, that unto itself is inspiring. Just seeing how much he was committed to creating a specific thing. And it's like, when you can tell his instincts in terms of the people he surrounded himself with are just like, he knew the right people to pick. It's just, how was he going to organize them with the technology that was available to him at that time?
H.R. Giger, he gets Dan O'Bannon, who eventually went on to work on Alien.
He basically had the Ridley Scott dream team, and then he's like, I formed a sweet dream team. Ridley Scott's like, hey, thanks.
Basically.
Yeah.
And then George Lucas is like, huh, I can use this terrible purpose, I'm going to use this one day for Anakin Skywalker, where
Right.
he's going to be the Jedi Messiah. And my co-host has a good point. New Mutants, 5 years and no one cares.
I've not seen it. I guess you have to go to a drive-in, right?
I can't see it. No theaters are open near me, but like the timing worked against it, and apparently it didn't know what kind of movie it wanted to be, because one guy reviewed it. He said it wanted to be a horror movie and it wanted to be an X-Men movie, and it failed at both.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, and I mean, with as many rewrites and reshoots as it had, you kind of knew there was going to be issues, but I was in for magic. Like, I wanted to see Ileana on big screen.
Yeah, I mean, it has the kind of visual elements that you remember,
Yeah.
But I don't know what the story's like. I guess they're doing like the Demon Bear thing.
Yeah, right? It was the Demon Bear. I imagine it'll be out on Blu-ray and streaming in like another month or two. But like,
yeah, maybe I'll watch it and then I can come back on.
I've been retro buying Blu-rays like lately. Well, now that they're out in 4K, so that's my buying lately. I just got Ghost in the Shell 4K for the anime.
Oh, I saw that.
That's beautiful. Like, it holds up. I'm now waiting for Akira because they've got to do a 4K Akira.
Yeah, I got the it's not the Blu-ray, but it's the box set. I bought it, I think, maybe 2 years ago, the box set of the manga where they have all the hardcover. And so my daughter, who's 12, is into manga, and I hadn't read Akira in years. And I started reading it, and I said, well, you can start behind me and I'll read it. And I got about midway through it, and it got into all this like crazy stuff. And I had to stop her at book 1 and basically say, hey, you can pick this up in a couple of years. But I had to put a stop to it.
Yeah, because I do remember like in the mid books, it starts getting a little nutty.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I started rereading Adam Warren's Dirty Pair. It had been a lot of years. It's nonsense. After all these years reading, I was like, why did I like this? I don't remember.
I used to love that book too.
Rama still holds up for me. Like, I still love that. And a lot of the Masamune Shirow books I really like. I just started kind of getting people into Blade of the Immortal now that it's wrapped up and Dark Horse put out those giant omnibuses.
Yeah, I have to go back. I've been reading the Blame collection.
I never read those.
Yeah, Blame. It's the artist. I'm trying to think what his first name is. His last name is Nihei. And it's kind of this post-apocalyptic. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like this. Yeah, man, you have to see it.
I'll look it up.
It's a very dark manga, technological cyberpunk type of thing. But they started re-releasing all of his older books as a larger format, sort of trade-looking kind of thing, and they're really great. You really get to see the art and stuff. I picked up those. I
went on a Junji Ito kick for a little bit. I loved his horror type books.
Oh, yeah.
My manga reading's been like way down. Like, I just don't get out as much as I used to. And, manga's not as easy to find. Yeah, that too. And I don't work at a bookstore anymore after 20 years there. So I don't have all that fresh influx of like stuff coming in where they just like dump all this manga in at one shot.
Yeah.
Chunky Zito. Oh, she's a fan. Well, I think it's midnight now, so probably time to get close to wrapping up. I know we didn't even get into music. So before we go, what are you listening to now when you draw?
Well, do you know the group Bicep?
No, I have not heard.
Yeah, they're like an electronic type stuff that I know you like and I like.
Yes.
Grammatic, I still listen to him. Run the Jewels, like we were talking about earlier. Huge fan of them. Also, too, like a lot of times I'll go on YouTube. They have a lot of like the kind of retro wave stuff where it just has sort of like almost sounds like anime soundtrack type stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing, you can find him, I think he's on iTunes now, or Apple Music. His name is Night Tempo. He does kind of a fusion of modern electronic sounds with samples and stuff from 80s Japanese pop singers.
Oh.
It sounds crazy, but if you like old school anime and you like electronic stuff, and hey, I do, you put them together and you get this guy Night Tempo. He does really cool stuff. You can also, he's on Bandcamp too.
I've been listening to a lot of Holy Ghost.
I don't know, what's that one?
They are kind of like a pop new wave group, but more modern. They have I'd say the very New Order influenced.
Oh, okay. You had me at New Order.
Yeah, I really like them. I've been listening to the Virgin Suicide soundtrack a lot because that Air did a great job on that.
I listened to the 2 Ghost albums that 9 Inch Nails did.
Yeah.
That, to me, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like listening to that in a loop, just because I felt like it sort of fit the mood of everything that was going on, you know? So those are great listens.
I went on a kick for DJ Shadow's Introducing and the first Uncle science fiction album after watching that James Lavelle documentary. I went into that pretty heavily.
Watch that. Yeah.
It's maddening to watch at times because just he was so high on his own supply where he's like, oh no, I wrote that. And they're like, no, you didn't. And he's like, well, I produced it, so I wrote it. And like Shadow is like, I'm out. Goodbye.
I'm done.
Yeah, basically.
That was like a great year, though.
Oh, very much. Trip hop in general, because was it the Tricky album? Pre-Millennium Tension came out right around then.
Yeah.
There was a lot of good stuff. Portishead, yes.
Interesting. Before the pandemic hit, I saw Massive Attack.
I've never seen them.
Yeah, they did all of what do you call it? Mezzanine. So it was all of Mezzanine as one concert, and the visuals that they had in it were just. It's almost like they challenged the idea of what you remember as being good, you know, like how we sort of through the lens of looking backwards, we sort of add nostalgia over what we remember, and then what they sort of did was create visuals that conflict with that concept, and then they played the music live over it, and man, it was just a fascinating thing to see visually and of course musically. It's to me their finest album.
I never got to see them or Radiohead.
I've seen Radiohead 3 times, fortunately.
The Underworld was the one for me. I've seen 5 now.
I saw them like 2 years ago, and right when they came out with the new album, that they was before they came out with all the kind of this newer stuff where it's the EP type stuff. And man, they're so great live.
Oh, definitely. Like they're kind of like the Rush of electronic music, where like
a little bit, yeah.
When they come out, like everything sounds like almost like CD quality.
Yeah.
Definitely, they're very good.
Brothers too.
I saw them DJ, but I never saw them actually play live.
Yeah, their live show, man. It's interesting because they focus more. They don't sound dated really. They really focus on a lot of their newer stuff and present it in a way that I think you're seeing like modern electronic music being presented. Has a little more of a DJ kind of a feel to it. But the visuals that surrounded, man, it was awesome. So they really delivered. I was happy about that.
They're on my list of I want to see. Like I want to see New Order one more time before they just disappear and don't come back out of retirement. There's a couple of bands like that. Like The Cure, I'd like to see one last time.
Yeah. There's there's still quite a few bands that I think don't really make albums the way they used to, but still deliver live. You know, it's back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like the same thing with creative people. I'm that guy who's saying like, yeah, play the stuff you played 20 years ago. You know,
you see that a lot of DJ shows where they're like, well, you don't play what you used to. It's like, well, no, why would I?
Right.
So I want to thank you for coming on. I know we were working on this for a long time. We kind of unpacked a lot.
Yeah. a lot
So
to catch up
I
on.
don't ever have a format or write down any plans, so it's just all kind of free flow. And I guess that's Jennifer and I. That's kind of our brand, I guess. So, where can they find you?
You can find me, Comic Carl with K, 2 Ks on Instagram, of course. That's where I post a lot of my artwork. And then I have Karl Alstaetter's Artland on Facebook, which is like a group where I post a lot of stuff as well. And yeah, those are the main spots.
And again, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate getting to talk with you because I feel like I haven't talked to you in person since a comic book show in Orlando 20 years ago.
Congratulations on your show, man. I know when you were first talking about it and then seeing it come out, it's really impressive.
It's evolved. It's always changing, and now we're adding more shows. Like we're talking about doing a Sandman read through with people who haven't read it before.
Oh, that would be neat.
Jennifer has her channel, Comics Will Break Your Heart, where she will talk about Saga and so that. She has a Patreon too, but I don't know. She wanted to do an OnlyFans where it's just Dr. Manhattan's dong, but she's got weird plans. But you can find me at comic_chop_news on Instagram because I couldn't get the actual Comic Chop News one for some reason. Twitter, I'm at Chop Comic. Saturday, we're doing our weekly show back again because we took last week off because of burnout. Jennifer has no idea what she's doing. Thank you. I knew that already.
Normally, I would say someone is Batman and Robin, but you're just kind of like Batman and Batman.
We're just sidekicks. We're going to be doing the Black Monday Murders by Hickman book club show sometime this month. The Dune Over every Monday. We're doing chapters 5 through 8 coming up. We keep adding chapters every week. So join us. We'll be getting to Duke Leto finally appearing, and our panelist Sid, one of my friends, has a giant Duke Leto crush. That is nice. her book crush, and now they cast Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto. It's out of control. She literally has every episode charting Duke Leto's big dick energy that he exudes just in discussion. That's her thing, so I just let her run with it.
Yeah, you got to let her run with that.
So thank you, everybody who tuned in. And if there's any questions that later appear in the comments, I will try and get to them. And if Karl doesn't see him, I will forward them to him so he can answer. And we'll try and do this again sometime. I know you were going to start a podcast or something at one point.
But now I think I've kind of enjoyed being a guest on different shows. So I think I'm just going to work on being a guest and learn from everybody and then start my own podcast.
My big thing was I feel like having scripted anything comes off less genuine. Because when I did try doing scripts, I felt like I was reading more than anything else. Jennifer and I don't talk about anything. We do loose outline. We're going to talk about this. And then we don't discuss anything else. So like our picks every week we bring, we never know what the other one's bringing to the table. Nice. Except we one week both said, I have a hate read, and it was the same book.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's a bit improv, yeah?
It's very much improv. We go off topic a lot. Especially, did you ever see The Lighthouse?
I have not seen it, but I have seen it available on my streaming services. It's
on Amazon Prime Instant.
Yeah.
I recommend watching it. It is such a mind fuck. Like, and it's just two dudes locked in a lighthouse together.
Yeah, and when one of those dudes is Willem Dafoe, you know there's going to be issues.
Yes, and he's the same one.
Oh, no. Okay.
It's a weird movie. It's got a little bit of Lovecraft to it. It's got a vibe to it, but not like Lovecraft Country. Have you been watching that?
Not yet.
It's actually pretty worth watching. Like, it's good. It's really damn good. I had to stop watching Watchmen on HBO because it just started getting too real with everything going on.
Yeah.
That it was a little bit upsetting.
Yeah, Watchmen is just at least the TV show is Very smartly done.
I got to I binged up to episode 4, and like I had to take a break.
Oh, you got to finish it.
I will eventually.
Are gold.
I heard about the lube guy. that just in general, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, he's the least of the problems.
All right, everybody. We're gonna end the broadcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Take care. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.